supplement industry is worth $177 billion. The average American spends $56 a month on vitamins that are in the toilet before lunch. And right now, in your kitchen, there are 3 ingredients that, when combined in a single glass jar and left to ferment for 7 days, can produce a living compound with more bioavailable nutrition than a cabinet full of capsules. The total cost is less than $4. The process takes 5 minutes. And the industry selling you dead synthetic vitamins and gelatin capsules does not want you to know this works. The 3 ingredients are raw honey, apple cider vinegar with the mother, and whatever dried herbs you already have in your spice rack. Turmeric, oregano, rosemary, thyme. It does not matter that much which ones you use. What matters is what happens when you submerge them in a mixture of honey and vinegar and leave them in a dark cupboard for a full 7 days. A study published in 2019 in the Journal of Food Science and Technology found that fermenting herbs in an acidic honey-based medium increased their polyphenol content by as much as 300%. Polyphenols are plant compounds associated with anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, and antimicrobial activity. Put more simply, they are part of what makes many medicinal herbs valuable in the first place. In their raw form, your body absorbs only around 5 to 10% of the polyphenols in dried turmeric. But after 7 days of lactofermentation in honey, that absorption rate climbs above 40%. Fermentation breaks down the plant cell walls, barriers your stomach acid alone often cannot fully open. That is why what used to pass through your digestive system almost untouched starts becoming far more usable. And this is not fringe science. It is not some internet fad. A second study published in 2020 in the journal Nutrients compared fermented oregano with unfermented oregano extract. The fermented version showed antimicrobial activity 7 times greater against E. coli and 4 times greater against Staphylococcus aureus. The researchers concluded that fermentation creates entirely new metabolites, compounds that do not exist in the raw plant. In other words, the herb does not just release what it already had. During the process, something new appears. Bacteria transform the original compounds into something different. A third study, carried out by Seoul National University in 2018, found that fermented rosemary extract reduced neuroinflammation markers in mice by 62% compared with only 19% from unfermented rosemary. Fermentation had created a compound called rosmarinic acid lactone, a molecule not found in the fresh herb. That means the bacteria did not simply preserve the plant. They manufactured a new molecule. And none of this is new science. It is forgotten science. Traditional Korean medicine has used fermented herbal preparations for more than 2,000 years. In the Ayurvedic tradition of India, turmeric has been fermented in honey since before written records existed. In Japan, dozens of herbs are fermented in a preparation called koso, associated with a gut microbiome diversity up to 3 times greater than that of the average Western diet. In rural Russia, fermented honey and herb preparations known as spitin were everyday medicine for more than 800 years, until the Soviet state replaced traditional healers with government-controlled pharmacies in 1924. Then, the modern supplement industry took these living fermented compounds, freeze-dried them, stripped out the bacteria, compressed them into tablets, and sold them back to you with profit margins reaching as high as 4,000%. A bottle of turmeric capsules costs around 430 Mexican pesos and delivers curcumin with bioavailability of only 2% unless piperine is added. A jar of turmeric fermented in honey costs less than 18 Mexican pesos per batch, and, according to published research, offers bioavailability between 35 and 45%. This is how you make it. Take a clean glass jar, whatever size you have. A mason jar works. An old jam jar works too. The size is not the point. What matters is that it is clean and that it is glass. Fill it about 1/3 of the way with raw, unprocessed honey, not industrial supermarket honey in the plastic bear-shaped bottle. Real raw honey. You can find it in farmers markets for around 140 to 210 Mexican pesos a jar, and 1 jar is enough for many batches. Add 15 milliliters of raw apple cider vinegar with the mother. The mother is that cloudy bacterial colony floating in the bottle or settled at the bottom. That murky layer is your starter culture. That is where bacteria like Astobacter and different strains of Lactobacillus are living, waiting to drive the entire fermentation process. Without that mother, almost nothing happens. Then add the herbs. For this method, dried herbs work better than fresh ones because they contain less moisture, and that lowers the risk of mold. You can use a single herb or a blend: turmeric and black pepper, oregano and thyme, rosemary and sage, ginger and cayenne. The ratio is 2 tablespoons of dried herbs for every 240 milliliters of honey. Push the herbs down until they are fully submerged. No part should be exposed to air. If even one leaf or one small piece remains above the surface, that is where problems begin. Seal the jar, but do not tighten it completely. Fermentation creates small amounts of carbon dioxide, and that gas needs a way out. You can cover the jar with a clean cloth secured by a rubber band, or you can rest the lid loosely on top without screwing it down all the way. Then place it in a dark cupboard at room temperature. For the first 3 days, open the jar once a day and stir it. You will see small bubbles forming on the surface. That is lactobacillus converting the sugars in the honey into lactic acid. That acid drives the pH downward and creates an environment where harmful bacteria cannot survive, while beneficial bacteria keep thriving. In other words, the system turns hostile to what harms you and favorable to what helps you. By the 5th day, the honey will already be noticeably thinner. The smell will be more acidic, like a softer vinegar. The herbs will look darker, and visible oils will have been released into the liquid. That is the extraction phase. The acids produced through fermentation are pulling compounds out of the plant material that a hot water infusion could never extract with the same depth. What tea barely touches, this process opens and transforms. By the 7th day, you have a living herbal oxymel. That is the traditional name. Oxy comes from the Greek word for acid. Mel comes from the Greek word for honey. Oxymels appear in medical texts dating back to Hippocrates around the year 400 before Christ. He prescribed fermented honey and vinegar preparations for respiratory infections, joint pain, and digestive disorders. The Roman army carried fermented honey during its campaigns as both food and medicine. In medieval Europe, monasteries kept cellars full of oxymels, the way modern hospitals keep pharmacies. This was standard medicine for 2,400 years, until the pharmaceutical industry decided there was no profit in something anyone could make in a kitchen. And this is what is happening inside that jar at the molecular level. Lactobacillus bacteria consume the glucose and fructose in the honey and turn them into lactic acid. That acid pushes the pH below 4.0, low enough to kill pathogenic bacteria, but not the beneficial strains already participating in the fermentation. At the same time, the acetic acid from the vinegar weakens the cellulose walls of the dried herbs and releases polyphenols, terpenes, and flavonoids that would otherwise pass through your digestive system with barely any absorption at all. Then the bacteria keep going. They transform those released compounds into new metabolites with greater biological activity. It is a 3-stage process: extraction, breakdown, and transformation. No tablet press, no spray dryer, no encapsulation machine can reproduce that inside a dead capsule. The dose is 15 milliliters a day. You can take it straight, mix it into warm water, or drizzle it over food. The fermented honey acts as a prebiotic, meaning it feeds the beneficial bacteria already living in your gut. The lactobacillus strains act as a probiotic because they introduce new live colonies. And the compounds extracted from the herbs deliver their active principles at levels of bioavailability that no drugstore capsule can match. A 2021 study from the University of Reading compared fermented herbal honey with commercial probiotic supplements in a randomized controlled trial. After 30 days, the group consuming fermented honey showed microbiome diversity 47% higher than the group taking supplement. Their inflammatory markers fell by 31%, compared with 12% in the supplement group. The researchers noted that the synergistic effect of combining prebiotics, probiotics, and bioactive plant compounds inside one fermented medium produced results isolated supplements could not replicate. The supplement industry knows this. In 2018, a leaked internal memo from one of the largest supplement manufacturers in the United States described fermented herbal preparations as a significant threat to capsule-based product line. The document recommended increasing marketing focused on convenience in order to discourage consumers from making their own supplements at home. Put plainly, if people discover they can make something stronger, more alive, and far cheaper in their own kitchen, the business of selling capsules starts to weaken. But there is more. The supplement industry does not want you to understand. When you buy a probiotic capsule, you are buying bacteria grown in a lab, freeze-dried, and sealed inside a gelatin shell. By the time those bacteria reach your stomach acid, studies estimate that between 60 and 90% are already dead. And the ones that survive often enter an environment they were never really adapted for, which means many of them fail to establish long-term colonies at all. A study published in Cell in 2019 found that commercial probiotics pass through the intestines of most participants without establishing stable long-term colonies. The bacteria in your fermented oxymel are different. They are alive. They are actively metabolizing. They have already survived in an acidic environment similar to your stomach, and they arrive accompanied by the same prebiotic compounds they need in order to establish themselves in your gut. Researchers call that a symbiotic system, a living system in which the bacteria and the food that feeds them arrive together at the same time in the same medium. No existing capsule can deliver that in this way. The difference can be measured. A standard probiotic supplement delivers between 1 billion and 50 billion colony-forming units per dose, and many of them are already dead or dying. 1 tablespoon of well-fermented herbal oxymel delivers between 100 million and 10 billion colony-forming units that are alive, active, and already proven capable of surviving in an acidic medium. These are not dormant bacteria hoping to make it through the trip. They are active bacteria inside a living system. Each batch you make lasts up to 6 months at room temperature. It does not need refrigeration, it does not need special equipment, it does not require prior experience. The bacteria in the honey and the vinegar do the work. You just provide the jar, and you can scale it as far as you want. 1 jar for personal use, a dozen jars for an entire family. Different herbs for different goals. Oregano and thyme for immune support, turmeric and ginger for inflammation, rosemary and sage for cognitive function, valerian and chamomile for sleep. Each jar costs less than 35 Mexican pesos in ingredients and replaces supplements that sell on the market for between 430 and 40 Mexican pesos per bottle. The supplement industry, valued at $177 billion, sells you isolated compounds inside dead capsules and calls it health. But 3 ingredients inside a glass jar, left alone for 7 days, produce a living medicine that outperforms almost everything you see on the shelf. The science is published. The method is more than 2,000 years old, and the only thing standing between you and a nearly unlimited source of living supplements is a jar, a little honey, and 1 week of patience. For 7 days, that mixture moves through a precise sequence your body can actually use. First comes extraction. The vinegar and the shifting acidity begin pulling compounds out of the dried herbs that would otherwise stay locked behind tough plant structures. Then comes breakdown. Fermentation starts dismantling barriers your digestive system often struggles to handle on its own. And finally comes transformation. The bacteria do not merely preserve what was there. They convert it into something else, into metabolites with stronger biological activity, compounds that did not exist in the raw ingredient when it first went into the jar. That is the part the modern supplement aisle cannot imitate. A capsule can isolate, a tablet can preserve, a powder can concentrate, but none of them can stay alive, keep transforming, and deliver plant compounds together with active bacteria and their food source in the same living medium. That is why this method keeps surviving every century that tries to replace it. For more than 2,000 years, people used fermented mixtures of honey, vinegar, and herbs as ordinary medicine. Not exotic medicine, not fringe medicine, standard medicine. It moved through Greek texts, Roman campaigns, monastery cellars, Korean traditions, Ayurvedic practice, Japanese fermentation culture, and rural Russian households before corporations ever turned health into a shelf product. Then the modern market took that living logic apart. It stripped the bacteria out, dried the rest, packed it into capsules, added branding, convenience, and massive markups. And what was once a living preparation made for almost nothing became a product sold back at industrial scale. That is the real contrast. On one side, a glass jar, raw honey, apple cider vinegar with the mother, dried herbs, and 7 days. On the other, an industry built on dead isolates, synthetic convenience, and margins that can climb to 4,000%. One system depends on life. The other depends on packaging. And once you understand that, the entire equation changes. What looks like an old kitchen trick is actually a compact biological factory sitting quietly on a pantry shelf. It extracts, it acidifies, it transforms. It creates a living symbiotic system that arrives in your body already active, already adapted to acidity, already carrying the compounds and support structure it needs to do more than simply pass through. That is why a batch costing less than $4 can challenge a market worth $177 billion. That is why a spoonful from a fermented jar can rival an entire cabinet of bottles. And that is why something so simple has been pushed to the margins for so long. The method was never gone. The science was never absent. The ingredients were never rare. The only thing missing was the decision to look back at what worked before industry taught people to ignore.